Fab. So thank you everyone for joining and welcome to our webinar. Yeah, we're really excited for this and happy International Women's Day. So yeah, the title of the webinar is The Secret Period, and then the political, the environmental, the professional, the gaslighting and the empowerment. So there's kind of lots of different realms that will be covered through each of the speakers, which is really exciting. This evening we have, or we'll be hearing from 3 incredible women, all from the Sikh community, who will be discussing their experiences and sharing their expertise on why we need better education on menstruation, and then other stages of female reproductive health, or people who menstruate reproductive health at an early age, but also then later on in life. We'll also look at how these conversations and lessons need to be had at school and at the home, and how that impacts then education, and that tries to hopefully stop stigma around menstruation that still exists. We were talking about life in corporate and sporting sector as well, and how stigma and lack of education transpires in the workplace, and how to talk to your family and what you can do to remove the stigma at home. So this is a part of our Sikh Human Rights Group Menstrual Empowerment Project, which we've been doing for about a year now. And this is where we look on a local level, look at schools, universities, places of worship, particularly gurdwaras. And so working with kind of a Binti Period Dignity at Work scheme, where we see if kind of there's an opportunity for these organisations to provide free, hopefully sustainable menstrual products in all of their bathrooms, but particularly obviously the female bathrooms. And then on an international scale, what we have done is created this organisation or network of all these different organisations from 5 different continents, covering a range of issues that are attached to menstrual education, menstrual health, stigma, education, access, and hygiene, and also looking at the economics behind sustainable menstruation products as well. What we're doing at the United Nations level is actually trying to ask the United Nations to put pressure on member states to remove the tampon tax, as it is an example of gender-based discrimination. And we're also trying to ensure that all menstrual products fall under this tampon tax removal, rather than just the disposable ones, which, for instance, in the UK, that's the case. And we're also pushing for the UN Women to create this basic curriculum for all member states to teach children from as young as 7 about menstrual health, and create a network of organisations globally to share their research and help shape attitudes towards menstruation, and fundamentally just reproductive health as well. Yeah, so what I'm going to do is just introduce the panelists who you'll be hearing mostly from, and then we can crack in. So we have got, a range of kind of panelists from different backgrounds to listen to today. So the first is Mandy Moore. I don't know if you want to wave, but yeah, so she's got quite the list. She's got a lot of strings to her bow. So she has recently started a new job as the legal counsel for Apple, EMEIA. I'm not sure if you want to say it out loud or say it as a word, but yeah, Mandy was also the director. Okay, I was like, this keeps going on, so maybe it's wrong. She's also the director of an event, a design and production company, which puts together public, private and corporate events ranging from 100 to 25,000 attendees. She is the advisor and steering committee member of the GLA, Mayor of London. She is also the president of the Sikh Games, which is a not-for-profit organisation created to open up more opportunities for ethnic minority participation in sports, whilst bringing communities together worldwide. The Sikh Game represents a dynamic sporting celebration of sports powered by values of equality, excellence and collaboration. She is the chair of the Professional Women of Faith Network, co-founder and advisory board member of the Council of Fostering, and head of strategy Sikhs in law. And she's recently been invited to be a fellow at the RSA. So throughout a lot of Mandy's work, what she does is focuses on this need for better female representation. And again, I remember you saying a few months ago that everything you kind of do, you want to work towards ensuring that young girls see themselves in kind of every single walk of life and all of their careers, which I think you fit into a lot of those. So, Yeah, well done. So the next we have Navram Kaur, also known as Sikh Mum on social media. She is a mother of four, yeah. So she's a mother of four children and a practices Sikh. She works in the clinical trials in central London, but her academic and employment history orientates back to media, where she worked for 8 years in the UK and the US film industry. So she uses her Sikh Mum social media platform to empower women to embrace a pain-free birthing mindset and navigate through challenges that women face as daughters-in-law, mothers, and wives. Given her passion for education, she also sits on the board of trustees for the SHRG UK and the governing body for her daughter's school. She has recently qualified in Douala, so has allowed her to kind of step into the purpose and support mothers in birth and postnatal stages of pregnancy. Her podcast, Sikh Parenting, with her husband, known as Sikh Dad on social media, is sharing their expertise of marriage and parenting with a raw and exposed approach to the reality of everyday life. She is also the co-founder of Sikh Parenting Club, along with her husband, which is the first online network for Sikh parents wanting to embrace Sikh conscious parenting. This space allows parents to explore their own blueprints and what they are scripted for their children. And then finally, but not least, we've got Manjit Gil Mbe. So before creating Vintage Period, so the CEO of Vintage Period, Manjit has had 20 years of business enterprise experience. Her role as a mentor for business women in Kenya with the Cherry Blair Foundation led to her starting her project Vintage Period. So her mission is to create a huge social impact whilst generating a sustainable organisation. As a British Indian, providing menstrual rights for women in India has become her overarching commitment to make a change. She was awarded an MBE in the 2020 Queen's Birthday Honours List for her work in the provision of period products to women around the world. Manjit is also a trustee for the Global Sikh Economic Forum. She is the ambassador of the Cherry Blair Foundation and the Women for the Future. So very impressive women. And a little bit about Vintage Period, the organisation she runs. So Vintage Period believes that every female deserves menstrual dignity, meaning access to education about menstruation, access to pads, and freedom from stigmas and taboos surrounding menstruation. They are also the first period charity in the UK and are registered in India, the US, and the Gambia. And they lead the government's period task force, which remit to end stigma and taboo and work on period education as a charity. So very, very impressive panel. So I will, pass over to the panelists themselves. So the first kind of question is to Manjit to, I guess, give a summary a little bit more. So could you comment to the current education requirements in the UK on menstruation and briefly maybe highlight the history of education on menstruation and how long it has been compulsory and to the standard it is at now?
Hi, Beth, and thanks very much for having me here. I would say that the best way to think about our menstrual education is, to be honest, girls as young as 7 or 8 will start their period. They'll bleed every month for the next 4 decades of their lives, and they're expected to learn on the job. And despite the fact that we have sex education in our country, we also know that when we did have it, we kind of did this, right? The video with the video around sexual education. But I believe that menstrual education should be a standalone topic, that girls should understand the dietary requirements. We're on our cycle every day of the month. We should know where we are. Obviously, the training impacts the impact of menstruation on our training if we're in sport. I mean, there's so many different areas of it. It is a standalone topic. We should know about emotions. We should know about hormones, everything. And I would say that even as our PHSE has developed over the years, I know that today that unless we train our teachers to eradicate their own shame, they are going to continue teaching menstrual shame, and that doesn't really change anything moving forward. So it's really important to kind of, I think there's so many campaigns and so many things out there right now that when you have a period, you become an expert, right? We think we're experts, but really we don't look at the 360 spectrum of everything that needs to be considered. And I think that's kind of where we're missing the gap today with so many organizations that are popping up and talking about menstruation. Even things like the language that we use, we don't use the word sanitary anymore, because sanitary suggests that periods are dirty. We don't talk about menstrual hygiene, because again, hygiene suggests that it's dirty. So there's so many different aspects of it. And I think the other thing that we also forget is, while we're talking about menstruation for girls, we've got to look at how puberty is affecting boys. Nobody really tells a boy what to do or expect when he has his first wet dream, for example. Mothers don't necessarily know how to support their sons. So there's so many facets of that age group where everything is embarrassing. Even our parents, right? Our parents, what we wear. It's the worst time to start menstruation, actually. And I feel so much for children who are not prepared for it. So I would say that there's so much that needs to still be done. Looking at cultural stigma and taboo, understanding where that comes from. And yeah, that's kind of where we are right now. It's not enough, and there's so much to do with it.
Thank you. No, I think that's a really great insight into where we're already at. I think as well with anyone I've spoken to around this topic from different age groups, everyone seems to have the same story of what they've learned and the same videos that they watched, etc. So it's interesting to see kind of how we have maybe not progressed so much in this area. So the next question is towards Mandeep. So obviously in your introduction, we spoke about your work in your various jobs, but particularly kind of your legal background, and also then your work on as the president of the Sikh Games. So yeah, given your experience working in both the corporate and the sports sphere, can you give the audience an insight into what you've noticed when it comes to education and access to menstruation in both of these sectors? And if it's due to this kind of historically lack of female representation in both of these careers, or if it's conversations in the workplace, especially misconceptions, which then obviously goes wider than menstruation. So looking into like misconceptions around miscarriage and pregnancy and menopause. So can you give a bit of an insight into kind of what you've learned from that?
Hi, firstly, thank you, Beth, for having me here with these amazing panelists. Women I very much look up to, so it feels like an absolute pleasure to be alongside them today. So your question with regards to, you know, what are we kind of, where are we with this, really is, when it comes to the legal sector, it was predominantly, there was a lot of males that would be lawyers, but now we are in a different position completely. So with solicitors, when you look at the stats of the Solicitors Regulation Authority, we now have 51% of females within the legal industry, which is amazing. So we have raced ahead, not by a lot, but we have, which is still, I think, a huge, huge accomplishment. I think I have been a qualified solicitor for about 7 years now, almost 8 in August, and I can't really say I've seen much of a change in terms of the language that's used, the availability. That, like, literally, it's just been very similar. You do have girls that, you know, when you're working in your office, females talk to about it with each other, but there's always been a shame. You still always kind of feel like you need to smuggle your pad, you know, to the toilet. So it's still, I think, it's not a norm, and it should be very much like you wouldn't hide, you know, taking your lunch out. Like, this is literally a part of you. Why would you need to do that? So there's kind of, I think on that angle, there is a lot of things that I think we ourselves have not changed as well, but I think that's more so to do with generally with society as well. In terms of the sports side, I think there definitely is a growing understanding. The more organizations that have more female coaches, the coaches are then more understanding of where the females are at. So why they have, like, for example, a dip in their training. There was also formerly this huge myth when it came into the sporting sector as well, that when you're actually on your period, you can't train. Sorry, I'm actually using a communal space to have this call and it's getting really loud, so apologies if you're struggling to hear me. So yeah, that's kind of where we've kind of seen that the more female coaches you have, the better they're able to understand the female athletes. They're better able to educate them that actually when you're on your period, you don't necessarily need to stop training. Actually, while you're on your period, is actually good for you to remain fit and active. So I think those are all things that formerly they weren't ever spoken about, or if they were spoken about, they were very much like one-to-one discussions, not set out openly. So I think in that space is definitely a change that we're seeing. And yeah, I think in terms of, you know, conversations about, you know, how companies react to miscarriages, you know, like, and those things, I think that really depends on the company that you work with. I think there are some that have always been ahead of the game. And obviously I'm going to always be an advocate for the organization that I work for, but it always has been ahead of the game when it comes to these things, when it comes to understanding these things. So I think that's just, if there were things that were in place on a government level that would push organizations to follow suit, that would always be a lot better, I think. But I think then it comes down to, well, how do you create that change in organizations? You create it by mirroring it from what's happening in government. So really, we don't actually have the representation in government. That's where it really needs to. If you really want to see this kind of like trickle down effect when it comes to various sectors, you also need to see the changes in government. You need to get more female representation there. When it comes to sports, it's not just okay to have athletes or females going ahead in sport, but actually you need more coaches to become more female coaches. You need more females to sit on boards for these organizations. That's where you really, really start seeing the change, I think.
Thank you. Yeah, we'll go into it as well later on about kind of a little bit more on the Sikh Games and actually what you've kind of implemented there and to ensure that this is the case. So yeah, finally, Navram, so if first of all you want to speak a little bit more about kind of the concept of your Sikh parenting organisation, but then from that, what advice would you give the audience who potentially have children or nieces and nephews, or again are just kind of around younger children, maybe their own kind of siblings, who are maybe hesitant to have these conversations with children, or how children can have these conversations with their parents, or again with their older siblings or aunties, etc.
Hi everyone, thank you for having me. I feel really honoured to be on a panel with these beautiful humans. The Sikh Parenting Club was something that my husband and I wanted to do for quite a long time. We were using social media to really share some of the challenges that we were experiencing as parents and as, you know, a married couple within the Sikh community, such as, you know, we nearly had a divorce and, you know, secondary infertility and, you know, issues with my, you know, when I got married and with the in-laws and all this kind of stuff. So we were sharing all this information on social media, and then what was happening was people were kind of wanting to speak to us one-to-one basis, and it was taking up a lot of time, and we did it for, you know, like 3 or 4 years, and then we kind of realized how could we reach more people? So we started up this kind of community where we could really kind of hone in and share our kind of practices at home and some of the upskilling we had done around conscious parenting with you know, this community. So that's really what that community is about. In terms of your question, which is around the advice that we would give about having these kinds of conversations, well, first, you know, I think it's really important to understand, you know, why would we not want to have those conversations? And the reason why I'm saying that is because we need to understand why we are in a position where, as a Sikh community, we feel embarrassed, and where that comes from, because actually in our scriptures, it's the period, the monthly cycle is referred to. So our guru would never do that if they were saying, and it's interesting the way it's used as well, because the line actually is, as a woman has her period month after month, so does someone with falsehood dwell within the mouth of the false. So it's like someone who's not authentic, someone who's not real, they just are constantly like that. And the period is used in that way. So to say that this is something that's happening all the time, is something that's constant, it's something that's there and it's real. And I think if we have that understanding as a community, really, we shouldn't really think that it's anything bad if our Guruji is talking about it. So that was something that was quite important to me. But obviously, through the British coming into India, and then kind of Hinduism having a huge part to play in the kind of Sikh culture, it was starting to be seen as unpure, unclean. You can't go to the Gurdwara if you have your period. You can't do seva, which selfless service, any kind of, you can't go in the kitchen. These kinds of things are being picked up, and one of the subjects that we've covered within the Sikh parenting community is scripting. What script has your parent given you, and are you scripting that to your child? And so I'm going to give my example. In our household, when my sister got her period, she went to my mum in fear of the fact that she thought something was wrong with her, and my mum said, just put this on, and gave her a pad to put on. And then she had to go and find out the rest herself, because my mum didn't know how to have that conversation. And I feel that it's because in having that conversation, you have to talk about sex then, because there's a connection. And I think that there's a fear around that in our community. And these are the kind of things that I would say to parents, understand what you feel uncomfortable with. And when you understand what that is, then you can really work through it and you can help your child. I mean, when I was growing up, my husband, my dad, he knew everything about the period. I would go to my dad and say, I'm having a really, feeling really poorly. Can you help me? And my dad would make a special kind of tea for me. He would give me a hot water bottle, and he scripted that to me. So when I got married, I said to my husband, when we found out we were pregnant with a girl, I said, she needs to be able to come to you with anything. And I remember the day she phoned me on my phone. I was sitting here at this desk, and literally I was about to go onto a call for work. And I just handed my phone to my husband like this. He was sitting on the next desk to me. And I said, oh, Mansimra's phoning. And he picked the phone up, and lo and behold, she was phoning to say, Daddy, I've got my period. Can you come and collect me from school? And he was the one who had to deal with it. And it was a beautiful thing. And, he said to me, I don't know what to do. I feel really nervous. And I said, look, you've got this. You know what you need to do. She needs to be, she's come to you because she knows that she can do that. So we're doing something right. He picked her up. He took her to the shop and bought her whichever one was appropriate. And, they kind of bought a few because they didn't know. And then they came home. And by that time I was off my call, and I gave her a hug and everything. And I said to my husband afterwards, how do you feel? And he said to me, it's not about me. It's not about me. This is about her. However I feel about this situation doesn't matter right now. It's what matters is what she's going through and what she needs. And these are the kind of things that we need to be open about when we're talking to our children. We need to be able to come to our fathers. But at the same time, if we are feeling uncomfortable, the advice that I would give would be to say, first of all, understand why you feel uncomfortable about having these conversations. Once you've worked through that, then you will be in a better position to be able to have those conversations. But you must have those conversations, because if you don't, your child's going somewhere else to learn that information, and you might not want the information that they're given. You might not want them to have that kind of information, because it could be more than you want them to know. It might be less than you want them to know. So it's about taking the responsibility. I'm not sure if I answered the question really, but but in the Sikh community, we should be open about it. You know, the more open we are and we're connecting it to Sikhi and the beautiful, you know, kind of concept of, you know, intercourse and intimacy and all of those kinds of things, and conception and all of those kinds of things, then we would realize that it's not unclean, it's not unpure, you know, it's actually a really beautiful experience to have. Yeah.
No, thank you. You did answer the question. Thank you. That was really well put. And I think as well, especially for the people who are listening who aren't Sikh or don't have that understanding of the Sikh kind of philosophy, it's a really kind of nice insight as well. I think as well the different brands, I would just remember a friend, a male anyway, thinking that they were like sports mode and something, like looking at the branding and people doing sports on them. So yeah, I can imagine it's a bit overwhelming. So on that point as well, I'll move over to Manjit and ask kind of a little bit more about the education side and the stigma, but also, as you mentioned, obviously there is this connection between when we talk about menstruation is the reason why a lot of people feel uncomfortable around it as well. And for instance, the UK government and how we don't like speaking about sex or anything is because there is that link to sex. And obviously, I don't know if Manjit, you want to speak a little bit more about how, for instance, in the Gambia and actually in India and a little bit more in the UK, how you're encouraging menstruation is taught separated from sex education.
I would say, as Navroop touched on, when we train our trainers, it's important to eradicate their own stigma before they deliver the education. But even from understanding menstruation, no girl really needs to know that if her egg isn't fertilized, that her period will start. And we've been sexualizing periods for millennia, right? But we know that this is where the stigma starts from. Parents don't want to talk to their children because if a girl starts her period, it means she could have sex and have a baby. So let's just take sex out of it completely. Let's talk about menstruation as a biological process, about the fact that girls bleed, how often they bleed, how many days they might bleed, what it feels like, the emotions you go through. Let's just take reproduction out of it completely and teach reproductive sexual health separately. Because then I know from what we've done in the beginning, in the early days, I remember having this big fear that one day there's going to be a fatwa against me, or I'm going to go and upset some community by saying what I do around menstruation. But I quickly learned that because I know when I was a kid, if I washed my underwear, for example, I had to put a towel over it, right? If it was hanging up to wash, I had to put a towel over it because God forbid my father or my brother would see that I wear underwear. So I guess I come from that generation where that a shame was there right from the beginning. I understand it. So when you have that understanding, it's like, well, okay, if I go to a village in India, how do I get the mother-in-laws to buy into the conversation that I'm going to have with the younger generation? Let's just look at it from their perspective, remind them of when they used a rag and how embarrassing it was. So it's to get them to start their story. So storytelling is really important. And I guess understanding that the stigma and the shame comes from sex and sex alone. Take sex away, make sure that you're different communities have different beliefs. And I think one of the key things that I've learned is actually we confuse religion with culture. Most of the stigma that comes around menstruation is from culture. And I know this because I was teaching a class of Muslim girls in a small remote village in India. And not only do they have their own stigma around menstruation from an Islamic perspective, but they've also picked up on the local Indian cultural things. And that's just crazy. It's like, we don't have enough stigma, let me take the cultural ones too. And I think that's the same for many communities, and especially for the Gambians, for example. So the Gambian, we have a contract with the government in the Gambia, and we're delivering education across the country. It's like a dream come true because we know that the impact that we can create is just ginormous. But for example, the Gambia is a Islamic country. They have polygamy, so most men dream of marrying 4 women. They still have FGM. And when I went to see one of the ministers to talk about our work, I kid you not, he said to me, I think, well, I'm very happy for you to come and work in our country, but I don't want you to turn our women into lesbians. He was so afraid of empowering women that he needed to box me up somehow. And I think, again, it's just understanding where that fear comes from, right? For him, empowerment means letting women step up, and perhaps he's not really ready for that. For empowerment to us as an organization means helping girls to understand their body. And if they understand their body, then they're able to take care of themselves. And that's what empowerment means. And that's what menstrual education should be really around. It's helping girls understand, or people, as the conversation is today, understand where they are in their cycle. We are on our period every day of, or our menstrual cycle every day of our lives. We will be on it for 40, 50 years of our lives. And, you know, there's shame at the beginning when we talk about menstruation, there's shame at the end when we go into the menopause. So we have a long, long journey ahead of us. And if we know where we are, then we know when it's the best time of the month to make those really difficult decisions, when it's a good time to stay away from people that irritate you, when it's great to go and do a marathon race. You know, if you understand where you are and you know what to eat so that you can complement how you feel on your cycle, not just the days that you bleed, but beforehand, then that's called empowering, and that's called giving girls tools to understand who they are and how to maximize living their lives. And I think if we're able to continue having those kinds of conversations when we talk around menstruation and selling it into schools, then we're going to be miles ahead. And I think sometimes I even hear, well, you can't take sex out of it, menstrual education. Of course you can. Girls start as young as 7 or 8. They don't even know what sex is. Why are we saying if your egg isn't fertilized, then you will start bleeding? Let's just take that away completely and then watch the shift in stigma and taboo being taken away from menstruation.
Thank you. No, that was fantastic. I think as well, we'd spoken about before kind of this, this empowerment, this body autonomy that you do gain when you start to understand what your menstruation and what your cycle looks like and actually what is happening to your body. And obviously then the issues around lack of education and then gaslighting, for instance, normalising pains that shouldn't be there, that don't exist. And obviously, you know, comes into a wider conversation, for instance, more in the UK. I don't know, I can't speak to other countries, but I know the US is also an issue, in Canada, etc., where, you know, we do normalise then birth control to treat the causes of what could be endometriosis or any other kind of issue that is going on in your body that your period is trying to tell you. You know, is, as you mentioned before, this 5th vital sign is an insight into your health. So while birth control is fantastic, but obviously if we are only using it to cure these pains or to regulate our periods, etc., then we're really trying to miss out actually, well, why is our body doing this? And so, yeah, I agree. I think that if we're being taught that from as young as 7, when birth control isn't actually being given to us at that point, then if we start to realise we're in a lot of pain at these ages before birth control and sex education comes in, then at least people can have a bit more of an insight into, oh, okay, this is why I'm in a lot of pain. I've got something else wrong. And hopefully things like endometriosis, etc., won't take 8 to 12 years to diagnose because, you know, people aren't aware they've got it for years. But yeah, I think no, it's fascinating. So from, again, we're kind of talking around this stigma that's attached to menstruation, etc. So Navram, I was just wondering if you could kind of, I guess you mentioned in before kind of talking through Sikh parenting about your techniques to encourage people to feel more empowered to talk about these issues. But do you kind of, on a wider basis then, so obviously we've spoken about menopause is going to be, I guess, stigmatized as well, but do you talk more about kind of then miscarriage or postpartum depression as well as a form of Sikh parenting, like as in your organization?
Well, yeah, we try to talk about everything really, all of the things that are not necessarily spoken about in an open kind of like forum, or, you know, where people don't feel that they can talk. And one of the things that especially around the taboo of, you know, I'm a massive advocate of talking to your children about sex before the schools do, because I don't agree with the way the UK education system shares with children about sexual intercourse, especially in secondary schools. I don't agree with the curriculum of the level of teaching that they do. Also, when a teacher, and it's very similar to like what Manjit was saying, that, you know, if a teacher has their own kind of trauma or their own kind of, you know, relationship with a certain subject, they're going to be enforcing that into their class, regardless of what the curriculum says. And that bias is going to seep into that child and affect the child. And so for me, it's about empowering the parents to say, you need to control the narrative about what you want your child to know, whether it's about the period, whether it's about sexual intercourse, whether it's about, you know, sexual orientation, or, you know, whatever it may be. And it's not easy to do that. I get it. But one thing I definitely have picked up on in this whole year of this journey of running this business is that every parent feels alone. They feel like they're the only one that feels that way, and that they can't handle this massive responsibility of talking to their children about these kinds of things, or even themselves speaking about these kinds of things. And what I've learned is we still have a long way to go within our community, but the one way that we've kind of tried to address it is having gender-led classes. So whereas our classes are kind of with both parents, we have kind of opened it up so there's just gender-led. So Gurpreet will lead, you know, one with like the men, and I will lead one with the mothers and or the women. And within that, it's not just about me coming with information or me bringing an expert, someone, you know, who's an expert in that field to talk about whatever that subject may be, whether it is, you know, postpartum depression, or, you know, kind of even, you know, antenatal depression, or, you know, any of those kinds of things that, you know, we don't really openly talk about in our community. It's also about being a sounding board to hear what these people have to say about this, you know, what has been their experience of it, whether they have experienced it or not, or if they have, you know, had an exposure through something else. Like, for example, with miscarriage, you know, I watched my mum have a miscarriage when I was very young at 7. And, you know, I remember going into the toilet and seeing something down the toilet, and it was quite traumatic for me. And it stayed with me for a long time. But I know that if I'm sharing that with someone else, that they're going to be saying to me, oh my God, I've been through that. And, you know, or I've experienced that myself, you know, as a woman. And it's important that we understand as a community that sharing is not a weakness. Being open about our experiences is not a weakness, but we feel that it is, because we think that when we share that, oh, you know, I've been through this, or I've lost my job, or I had a miscarriage, we're seen as failures. And because we're a warrior clan, that you can't cry as a warrior, you know, it's not the done thing. But ultimately, what I really am passionate about is showing our community that within vulnerability is strength. You know, it's in those moments that we really do rise, you know, from the ashes, and we can show, you know, that actually I am stronger than ever. And if we are showing our children, modeling that behavior to our children, you know, what kind of a community are we raising? Because for me, I feel like, you know, our children will be so empowered to say, you know, right now, Mum, you know, my daughter, she's, you know, she's kind of shares the same kind of cycle time as me. So she was saying to me, how are you feeling today, Mummy? She's asking me, you know, and I said, I'm feeling not too bad. I'm going to go for a run because, you know, exercise is really good. Like, you know, Benji was saying, exercising is really good during, you know, cycle. And I said, how do you feel? And she goes, I feel like I just want to lay on the couch. And I was like, just do it then. You know, just do it. And, you know, my husband came in and he's like, you know, what are you doing? You haven't done your chores. And she's like, I'm just having a lay down on the couch. And he was like, okay, yeah. So it's about having those really open conversations and then modeling that behavior to our children and then to the community around us. And that's what we try and do within Sikh parenting. So, yeah, I mean, there are lots of techniques, but ultimately it's about being prepared as well. Most people don't want to have those conversations because they don't know what they're going to say. And I think that's really amazing. Like when Manjit is like going out there and, you know, training people and having these conversations, what we did is we hired an expert. When Mansima was 5 months into her period, we hired somebody who specializes in periods. We had her come to our house. She did a presentation, and she told her about the cycles, connecting it to the, you know, the seasons, and it was amazing. You know, she really could, and you know, also saying to her that, you know, if this is happening, this is not normal, so we need to get this checked out. And it's like a lot what you were saying about understanding the body is speaking to you through the period, right? I am a PCOS sufferer. I suffer from polycystic ovarian syndrome. I wish my doctor had picked it up sooner, and I wouldn't have gone through some of the things. I'm 41 now, and I'm fighting this syndrome now, you know, but because I have this information now, I'm telling my daughter, these are the things we shouldn't be eating. These are the things we should be eating. These are the things. So it's just about education, understanding our bodies and connecting with that, and then modeling that to our children, modeling that to others, and speaking openly about it, and not seeing that as a weakness.
Thank you. No, I think, yeah, the way you're doing it with your child sounds, yeah, perfect, in the sense of you have got this communication that just allows her and yourself to speak so candidly about how you feel. I think there's the joke that this is the only time in life someone will bleed for about 7 days and just no one will talk about it, and you should just hide it. I think if anyone else is doing that, you'd probably say something. It's a bit of a concern. So yeah, no, that's great. Thank you. I
was just going to sorry, just wanted to add one more thing, Beth. You know, that time, that time of, you know, when your child is going through something. So like something like, you know, that, you know, Manjit was saying about, you know, when your son, like I have 2 sons, you know, when they have their first wet dream and, you know, all of that kind of stuff, these just are conversations that just don't happen. Where is that child meant to go? We have a responsibility as parents for them to know, I can go to my mum, I can go to my dad with anything. And if we are not if we're not setting ourselves up for that position, don't complain when your child's going out and learning from someone else and they're getting the wrong information. But ultimately, it's like understanding that, you know, our child is our responsibility. It's not about how we feel uncomfortable. It's about what they need. And that's like one of the most important things that we should really, really be understanding.
Thank you. I think as well, like you said, these things that happen to children do happen so young that it's learned behavior, and it's like, well, where is it being learned from? If it's something that they're learned that they should be embarrassed about or shamed about, then might be at school, but it also might be, again, kind of how we project, like Manjit said, and you all kind of said, I suppose, in terms of how a teacher might teach kind of around these topics. If they're teaching and projecting their own shame onto these topics, then again, you're only going to just absorb that as a child. That's what you do. You absorb information and just then release it when, you know, kind of you're in that point. But so as Mandeep, you mentioned kind of earlier in terms of the Sikh Games, so what you've done is to ensure that each country has a female and male representative. They get the entire vote, from what I remember. So if obviously they have only the one representative, then again, they don't get a whole vote, they get half of the vote. So could you kind of talk a little bit more about why this is so important to you, and how, if at all, for instance, menstruation plays a role into how athletes train? You again mentioned it before, so don't worry about repeating yourself. But yeah, in terms of kind of in how what you've picked up on from trainers, and actually how it does make a difference in terms of maybe people who menstruate as athletes, how that will affect their training, and why it is so important to have this representation so that each kind of athlete is training to the best of their ability.
Yeah, so I think that decision to have that representation was really not, I'm not going to say it was completely due to menstruation, but it was due to the whole element of having female involvement. And so one of our kind of core focuses as the Sikh Games was always to try and work towards creating playing fields which were reflective of the multicultural society we live in. But when you look at that, actually we're failing to even create playing fields which are reflective of the civilization that we live in, right? Because we don't have equal amounts of men and women on playing fields. We don't talk about and celebrate when the England women's football team is doing so well. We don't talk about it. We're only talking about the men's ones. They don't have people going to watch them. They definitely don't have as many clubs, sports clubs for women as much as they do for men. So really, I mean, originally that was the kind of focus. So as the UK, this was the first Sikh Games where we actually had a female president, where we had female board members. So it was like really like a completely, you know, like a really weird situation when we jumped on a call with like one of the countries where they had all middle-aged men just looking at me, giving them a presentation about where we wanted to go with the Sikh Games and how we actually wanted to work with them to try and create an international thing. So actually, I think that is something that we generally kind of felt that there was, for various reasons, we needed female representation there. So only I will understand what the 12-year-old me, which has just joined high school, that wants to go to 6 sports clubs in the 5 days of the week after school, like how I went about that, why I wanted to do that, how I cater for somebody that was like me, that was very big into sport. And so I think from that perspective, we thought it was really, really important. Just saying, oh yeah, you know, like a group of men saying, yeah, this is good. We should have this sport for the women, but none of the women actually speaking about it. None of the women are there to make that decision. None of those women are there to understand. But then when that discussion comes about when you're like, we started evolving the discussion and then started talking about, you know, when we started in like recruiting our performance team. So we've got a performance team, which is really kind of, there's a nutrition coach there, there's a strength and conditioning, powerlifting, there's sports scientists. So there's all these people that form part of this, a sprint coach as well. And so all these coaches that are kind of coming in there, they're creating a program for males and females. How are they going to do that? You know, like we don't have any understanding of the females if you're going to have just men. So we're lucky we've got Karen Bain. So the I think the most powerful of things that you could have as a powerlifting coach, we've got a female there, which is great. But I think excuse me, I think it's really important because you know, having spoken to you, so today before coming onto this webinar and being a part of this discussion, I actually found it was really important for me to go and speak to our coaches and to go and speak to, you know, I even spoke to the representative from the England Wales Cricket Board, Sangi, who sits on our advisory board, who we work very closely with. I spoke to the ambassadors, and really, I think the gist is it's not a one size fits all. Like no two women's periods are going to be the same. Nobody's experience within or whilst having their period is also going to be the same. So I think it's just a case of understanding that there's going to be that variation there. And I think the more representation that we've got, the more females that we've got that are there to understand what these athletes may be going through, the better we will become at being able to cater for them. So I think that's where, you know, look, I guess that's where, from so many angles, you know, to why it's important to have that representation, have that kind of, you know, have the men and the women there, is for one, to actually make sure those playing fields are catering for women, but also in all the other strands, you know, in advisory positions, we've got females, sports leads, we've got females, regional leads, we've got females. And actually, we were even exploring on a regional level, what more can we do? So it was really nice to see that when in Wolverhampton, the area in England, which has the largest Sikh population, that was also the area where we recruited the first female regional lead, which was amazing for us, because what that means is, that means other women will be comfortable and confident to go up to her to ask her any questions about what their hesitations might be for signing up, how to sign up, or, you know, what to do when something happens. You know, they've got somebody that they can go to. So I think that's, you know, like for many reasons it's important, but particularly I think having that understanding on coach level, you've definitely got to make sure that at the very least, for the female teams, you've got to have female coaches there to be able to talk to them and understand them, and understand where there may be dips in performance, what may be happening with them, how we can actually cater for them, make a case better for them.
Amazing, thank you. And yeah, you've done your research with some very, very impressive people, so thank you for that. So this is kind of the same question for all of you, I suppose. So we can start with Manjit, but what advice would you kind of give the audience to feel more empowered by their menstrual cycle? Or if they are not someone who does menstruate, then how they can be more of an ally and actually work towards removing stigma without, again, randomly asking a woman how their period is, I suppose.
I guess firstly, it's just to understand that it's normal. It's actually considered the fifth vital sign. So if I was to get knocked over in the street and picked up by an ambulance, by the time I'd get to the hospital, the first thing they'd ask me is, when was your last menstrual cycle? Or, the first day of it. And until we get to that point where we just treat it like anything else that we have as a body function, it won't change. And it's almost like feel the fear and do it anyway. If you haven't had those discussions yet, just start with the simple one of talking to your mum. Get your mum to tell you what her period was like. Find the language, because actually, I remember when I first spoke to my mum about my work, I said to her, what's the Punjabi word for menstruation? And she said, monthly. I said, Mum, monthly is not a Punjabi word, but that was all that she knew at the time. And it's only when I started getting her to think about it that she was able to find the language. And unfortunately, I guess that's what's happening around the world. In the Gambia, they don't know what the biological word for menstruation is, because they've used so many code words over the years that it no longer exists. And I think that's going to happen. Even period isn't the correct term. It's something that reflects to a cycle happening on occasion, right? Menstruation is the actual word, and we don't use menstruation because it's too long or it sounds too scientific, but if we don't use it, it's going to go one day. And I did want to also add with simple things, like, for example, in 2019, we signed up the Khalsa Jatha Gurdwara in Shepherd's Bush, which became the first temple in the world to have access to free period products, and also with a remit to discuss menstruation within its community. And the only reason that we were able to get that far was because I found a couple of men that actually supported the conversation and had the guts to talk about periods. And that's it. When you find the courage to talk about it, once you've talked about it, you can't, it's like riding a bike. Once you've ridden a bike, or you know how to ride a bike, you can't unlearn how to ride a bike. And I would say that's where you start from. Start talking about periods. With Aaron, for example, who is now 15, when he was 7, and this was when I first started my work, I remember he went to an art exhibition with Rupi Kaur, and Rupi Kaur is an artist from Canada. She was famous for having her pictures taken down by Instagram because she had a period stain while she was lying on her bed. So she did an art gallery, and I hadn't really had that conversation with Aaron, but on the way back, he said to me in our car, he said, "Mummy, why do women bleed out of their bottoms?" And I did the normal thing that any other parent would do. I remember my insides falling and thinking, oh my God, what am I going to say to him? But I gave him the answers for the time that he was ready in his life. So he said, is it something? I said, oh, it's to do with when Mommy, and I didn't know at the time, right? So this is my own psychological thinking. I said to him, it's to do with having babies. And he said, oh, does that mean you had 3 periods then, Mummy? And I said, yes, because that's all that he needed to know. And that was his basic level of understanding. And then I would say over the years, he's become so eloquent. And for him, I think it was 2018, we were at an EY Sikh event, and he stood up in front of 300 people to talk about periods and menstruation. And one of the things that he said, and I was astounded by it, was, I don't understand why we're embarrassed about periods. It's the same blood. We all have blood inside of us. Why are we embarrassed? And it was the most simple sentence or statement that anyone could have ever made. And even the audience, they just kind of gasped at his simplicity. And today, he's now 15, he's championing the discussion in front of his peers in school. But he had sex education at age 11 or 12, just the last year of junior school. And he came home and he said, oh, Mummy, we had sex education today at school. And again, even though I've been talking about periods and puberty, I remember thinking, please don't ask me any questions. but he said that the girls and the boys were separated, that the girls were told if anyone asks what those colourful wrappers are, just to say they're sweets. I said, what? They separated you to the boys, to the girls? He said, yeah. I said, so did they talk to you about periods? No. He said, but mummy, what I realised is that maybe I need a pad too. I said, what do you mean? He said, well, we have wet dreams. And I thought, I can't believe that I've had all these conversations with my son. He knows about menstruation and puberty. And now he's come back from school and this is what his understanding is. So you can't leave those conversations to the education system. You do have to have those conversations yourself, because how you talk about menstruation with your children is something that will affect them for the rest of their lives. And I know that everybody doesn't have the skills or the ability, and I guess that's why we exist. But ultimately, as Navroop said, these conversations are for the future generations. You know, if you don't trust someone with that conversation, then you've got to have it yourself, and keep talking. The more you talk about it, the more you hear other people's stories. You'll hear where the stigma exists. You'll hear how to have those conversations, and you pick up on ideas. Did I answer the question? Because again, I think I go off on a rant. I talk about periods all the time, but I never talk about it enough. It's a little bit like that. I'm starved of it.
No, you definitely did. I think that your stories, yeah, very much kind of set the scene, as well as to how it can be just different for everyone, and it is just kind of go with your gut and try to be, I suppose, as candid about it as you can. But no, that's really enriching to hear about your son. He definitely sounds like your son. But yeah, no, I think the amount I talk to my director and my male colleague about it is they've become very numb to the word now. So I suppose there is that. You just kind of keep saying the word and see how they react. Navroop, do you kind of want to, again, answer the same question? So what advice would you give to maybe the audience to feel more empowered by the menstrual cycle, or to be more of an ally and remove the stigma?
I probably would just echo what Manjit was saying, to be honest. When you talk about something, you normalise it, and the conversations may not always go the way you want, but like I said, preparation and kind of really understanding yourself, what you want to say, or, you know, and also active listening. So if you are speaking with somebody else, being prepared to listen to what they want, what they have to say about it as well, is really important. And I think that we really underestimate active listening. But in terms of allyship, which is something that I'm really passionate about in lots of different kind of areas, is around, you know, getting educated on something is really does show kind of allegiance, you know, with you know, kind of supporting someone or supporting something. And so, you know, taking the time and asking questions, using curiosity. Gurpreet, before I came on here, I said to him, what was your experience of period? Right, what was your experience of this? And he said, well, my mum and my sisters used to hide it from me, so I had no idea what it was, but I only learned about it after I got married. So he only learned about it when we got married, and then, you know, he was kind of hearing it from me, and I was talking very openly about it. I was talking openly about it in front of my dad, which was even more kind of mortifying for him. And there was a big change there where he had to kind of, and I think that was really great, actually, because it really helped him to kind of understand that actually that's okay, because they're doing that, and my father-in-law's doing that. And so I think that getting educated on it, taking the responsibility to learn about it as well. And but also I think having compassion is really important as women as well, for women who don't have a period. So, like, you know, I have lots of people in my community, friendships, should I say, as well, you know, who, you know, they suffer from lots of different kind of issues around their menstruation, and they haven't had one for years, and how they talk to me about, they don't feel like a woman, and they don't feel, you know, that their body's not doing what it should be doing, and there's really isn't that much that helps them when it comes to the medical side of things. You know, they want to give you this pill and that pill, and, you know, they want to, but no one really wants to get the root cause of what's actually causing these issues for a lot of these women, and that can be really damaging to mental health as well. And so I think it's not just about people who don't have a period, it's about people who do have a period, and supporting women who don't have a period as well. And I think that's a conversation that doesn't happen enough as well. So, but yeah, thank you.
Yeah, definitely. I think that, again, because we're so nervous to talk about, or resistant to talk about these conversations, then it's almost seen as like, well, anyone who doesn't have a period and not because of the pill or whatever reason is, oh, well, you're blessed, you know, at least you don't have to worry about it. And actually, because we don't talk about it in a positive way, you lose the mindset that actually, yeah, these women will feel very different, or these people will feel very different about their own bodies, and actually what the implications of that is, you know, what is kind of wrong with their body that means that they don't have this period, or yeah, that they don't menstruate. So no, you're right. That's a really kind of insightful point to make. And yeah, finally, Mandeep, what advice would you give to kind of anyone, and maybe even particularly kind of in maybe the corporate or more male dominated kind of areas that you have worked in as well?
I would just say talk about it. And talking about it, I think, is amazing. I mean, good place to start is at home, you know, good place to start. You know, I can't, I think for many years, I didn't ever speak to my father about it. And actually, I don't think I technically spoke to him about it first anyway. I think it was Manjit. I don't know if you recalls, but in June 2018, we were at Central Gurdwara, Kalsajata, and we were in the Langar Hall, and I introduced my dad to Manjit and the amazing work she does. So that was the first time I spoke to him about the word menstruation. So that was great, because I think it is very much like Manjit mentioned, it is like riding a bicycle. Once you've said it, once it's out there, you then feel comfortable, you feel confident. But now actually, whenever I am on my periods, you know, I make a point of not smuggling my pad into the bathroom. I actually make a point of walking with it in my hand, because actually there is nothing to be ashamed of. My dad looks and he asked me, "Are you okay?" Like literally, you know, like what is going to happen? Nothing is going to happen. So it's so nice to be able to do that, and you know, I'm always grateful for that. And I think the kind of the reason, and I think for me, the reason why I do a lot of what I do is predominantly because I feel like it's for the next generation. So if I'm doing it, my nieces now, will be empowered to do it. You know, they'll feel comfortable and confident to be able to share what it is they're going through. You know, one of my best friends, she, you know, has had a lot of issues, you know, with her periods, but I think very similar to what Navroop Benji said, had she been in a place where she was earlier on encouraged to talk about it openly, she would have been able to actually avoid it going as bad as it went for her. So I think, you know what, open discussion, you talking about it is not about you talking about it. You talking about it is helping the next generations to also be able to open up about it, and potentially a loved one, you know, helping them in their, you know, their health. But I think generally speaking, I think, you know, once you've kind of started doing that, then I think in corporate cycles, you know, there's a lot of kind of like events and things that we host, but actually creating events. I think International Women's Day is an amazing, amazing thing. You know, even though, you know, some people say, and we put a post up about it as well today, to say, yeah, it's a day, or, you know, you can, some people celebrate it as a week, but some people celebrate it as a month. However you do it, you know, I'm so grateful for the fact that we actually have International Women's Day, month, week, whatever we want to call it, because actually it's given us an opportunity to come together to have a dialogue. It's given an opportunity to others which wouldn't have found a reason or a day to come and listen to this kind of conversation. So I think just, you know, like, thank you to organizations like yourselves, Beth, for the work that you're doing to actually encourage this type of work, where you're bringing an organization, fostering an environment to host open discussion about this and educating people. I think that is something that I would definitely, you know, suggest, even in corporate environments. I would say, if you work in a corporate environment, actually try and see ways of celebrating these kind of events. You know, we should see it as a celebration. I've never ever been upset about the fact that I have a period, actually, because when I eventually spoke to my mum about the fact that I was on my period, and she questioned me because I thought I was in trouble. But when she actually spoke to me about my periods, she actually said to me, she said, you know, it's really good, congratulations, because you know what it means? It means that you can, you know, you can have a baby. And I was so happy. And then I was like, you know, literally my whole face changed. Like, and she said, I literally saw your face, your color just of your face actually just changed completely because I was so scared. And then she went on to tell me something, and I was only, I think I was about 11 and a half, 12, I think at the time. And then she told me, and she said, you know, there are some places where when girls come onto their periods, they have parties for them, because actually that is a big thing, because then you're going to put out into society that, you know, our daughter has had their period. So, you know, I think sharing positive things is really important, talking about it at home in a place that you're comfortable talking about it, but thinking of it not that you're doing it for yourself, but you're doing it for the generations to come. You're doing it for these, you know, having these environments where you're being able to talk about it. You know, as the Sikh Games, this is the first post that we've shared, which has been about menstruation, even though we've not been around for that long. But it is so nice to be able to do that. And I hope that this is first of many similar types of events where we get an opportunity to share with us something that definitely is worth celebrating.
Thank you. No, that was yeah, all of you answered that so differently, but so well as well. Thank you though. Yeah, so I was going to open now the floor if people did have any questions. I've had a lot of comments that have been people who are surprised by their dads having the same sort of reaction to you all. But yeah, so if anyone does have any questions, etc., if you wanted to kind of either pop them in the chat or just unmute yourself or pop your hand up, however you kind of want to do it, then yeah, we'd love to hear from you. Give everyone a minute just in case. But while I'm sure everyone is waiting to come up with questions, did you guys just want to speak a little bit more about your organisations and maybe where people can find you, for instance, if you put like handles in the chat, but also a little bit about, yeah, the Sikh Games, maybe more people want to get more involved, same with Sikh parenting, same with binti period, etc. I don't know if Manjit, do you want to start first? Yeah,
I'm kind of doing a shameless advert today, so it is just binti period. We're on all the socials. We've got a website. We're always looking for volunteers, and of course, if you want to donate to help us, then please do. I think I can't remember what it was that you just said, Mandy, but it's this idea that, no, I've forgotten it now. I'll have to come back to it.
We've got,
what I was gonna, oh sorry, yeah, just about the workplace. So we launched a campaign called Dignity at Work a few years ago, and last year Surrey County Council became the first county in England to provide free period products in over 55 locations across the county, and that's designed for absolutely anybody that would walk into a public building and can have access to period products. We do this with organizations as well. So if you would like to set something up in your organization, it's a sustainable solution because we have collection bins that people can donate, and then we have boxes where you can collect items as well. And of course, we also go in and do menstrual health workshops as well. So please do get in touch if you think your organization will be interested.
Thank you. And with that, can they find that on the website? That's just on your...
It is, yeah. So it's bintiperiod.org.
Fab. I'll put all of that in the chat. But yeah, I believe we do have a question. I'll just unmute.
Yeah, thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to talk. I'm Dr. Korochukwu from Nigeria, the Executive Director of CEO Center for Public Health. Currently, we are hosting a platform, 10 Million Voices, to speak for menstrual hygiene, management, and period poverty. I benefited a lot from this seminar. Our presentation is perfect. It contains a lot of message, especially how to go on about educating the children about the menstrual health and sexual education. But I would suggest, if we can achieve by mobilizing all the people who are working on menstrual hygiene to form a coalition so that we can be using one language. In some countries, when you go to some countries, they're using another term for menstrual hygiene. Some are using period poverty. Some are using a lot of languages, which makes it not be uniform, especially when you are trying to communicate. And I've really looked at the term menstrual hygiene. Hygiene makes it as if menstruation is dirty. I think we need to coin a word to remove that hygiene. It makes it as if we are trying to correct something that is dirty, adding a stigma. That's my own suggestion. And it has been raised in many forums that are talking about menstrual hygiene. Menstrual education, menstrual management, or menstrual talk is better than adding anything hygiene. And period poverty, when you talk about period poverty, I don't know the angle that one is coming from. I think we have to look at uniformity of language to make the communication very easy. Another point is how do we form a coalition of all the people talking about menstrual hygiene and also push it? Example, what we are talking in the Zoom, what are the percentage of the world population that has access to Zoom? It's time we need to go to door, grassroots, educate the illiterate mothers in the remote areas, especially in the developing countries, who has a lack or a paucity of means of communication. This is my humble suggestion. Thank you so much. And I'm so happy, excited to be among you. I've learned a lot today. Thank you so much, Beta, for inviting me to this presentation.
Thank you. Yeah, so Stefan is also from, as you mentioned, the Central Public of Health, and they also, like Sikh Human Rights Group, have the UN consultative status. So that's stuff that hopefully we can start pushing collectively at the UN. So that's, as I mentioned at the beginning, is what we're trying to push is this global elimination of the tampon tax, and asking the UN to set, step-by-step guide into how countries can do that and the challenges they might face, but also, as you mentioned, this almost global governing body that will identify at least the basic curriculum that needs to be taught, but also then, this language. And unfortunately, at the UN, they do still use menstrual hygiene, so it is making sure that the language used doesn't then reiterate stigma. Sorry, I don't know if anyone else wanted to talk about a little bit more about their organisation. Well, if anyone else has any questions and they're coming through. Manjit, or I think you've put in yourself.
Maybe I can just add some words around the last statement. It's really difficult in this menstrual space for there to be a coalition, because everybody is kind of fighting for the same kind of thing, and it's a little bit sad. And the larger organizations, like for example the water companies, because they're so big, they don't really have grassroots activities, so they don't really understand the reason for why we would use menstrual health and not menstrual hygiene. And that's the problem that we have around the world. Even Menstrual Hygiene Day, which is on May the 28th, it comes from the Water and Sanitation Organization, WASH United. And we told them 6 years ago that they should change it, but they're not ready to do so. They don't understand the need or why. Even the term period poverty, that doesn't really help anyone. That further stigmatizes menstruation, because if you can't afford food or water, then you can't afford period products. Why add that extra stigma to it? So we're not a fan of that. I would say that the best term is one that we use, which is menstrual dignity, and menstrual dignity in itself means that you understand menstrual education, you have access to period products, and you're empowered by understanding your period, and you don't have the stigma and taboo. So there is that period dignity as a term that's been used over the last couple of years. It would be fantastic if we were able to come together and join forces, but I'm not sure how long that's going to take. So the work that Beth is doing with United Nations, hopefully that will take us closer to it sooner.
Thank you. Yeah, I think you summarised that really well. And it's interesting, one of the organisations that I've been working with who is in Nepal, their organisation is called Dignified Menstruation, because again, they think the exact same way. That is their kind of mantra, is to make sure that actually it's a dignified menstruation. It doesn't, while that comes into hygiene, while it comes into health, education, access, the whole point is that people feel kind of dignified while they have it and not ashamed, predominantly. What I was just going to mention as well is, so as Manjit mentioned, in terms of the work you're doing with your Dignity at Work schemes, that'd be great if people want to get more involved in that. What myself and one of our interns did today was also created a template letter that you can send to maybe your head teachers at school or to universities, etc., that talks a little bit more kind of about requesting that they do provide, free, hopefully sustainable menstrual products in all toilets. So if this is something that people kind of did want to use as a template to at least engage the conversation and start to kind of feel a little bit more like an ally, a little bit more of an active kind of role in this topic, then here is a link to kind of a template they might want to use. But otherwise, the only other kind of point I had to make was that what we're doing as a part of the Commission on the Status of Women, so the 66th session, which is with the UN, on the 21st of March, we're holding an event with Manjit from Busy Period. We're also holding in with Megan, who's from Zen Africa, who's based in Kenya, which was the first country to eliminate the tampon tax. We have Sally, who is the COO of TOTM, which is a sustainable period product or menstrual product company who are based in the UK. And we have Ella, who is an activist at The Guardian, have covered quite a lot. She's been based in the UK, but she's worked a lot in Europe. And with that conversation, the topic is called allowing women to be environmentally mindful throughout the whole month. So each year the CSW has a theme. This year's theme is women and the environment. So if I will send the Eventbrite link in the chat, if people did want to sign up already. But the conversation is, similar to today in terms of, we'll talk about the education side, we'll be talking about the economics behind sustainable menstruation, particularly in European countries, the UK, and also in the US as well. Kind of taking a little bit more ownership about what we can do if you're in a place of privilege where you can actually have access to these sustainable products, actually making sure that we do that. And we will also be talking about the environmental impact that the disposable products do have, and also the ethical kind of side of it as well. So lots of different parts to the conversation with, again, some fantastic experts. So I've just popped that in the chat. But otherwise, unless anyone's got any more questions, or if anyone has anything else to say, I'll let everyone get on with their International Women's Day. Don't think anything else. But thank you very much for joining, everyone, and again, thank you to our panelists.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Thank you for hosting us all.
No worries.
International Women's Day, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.